The market on the edge of the Helios station was always loud, always crowded, and always full of desperate voices. But on that particular rotation, even the noise felt heavy. A long line of alien workers, captured during border conflicts or sold off by corrupt clans, stood in metal frames that locked their hands and kept them from running. Most buyers walked past without even turning their heads. Some slowed down only to inspect the captives like objects. And in the middle of that line stood a thin alien girl with gray-blue skin, quiet eyes, and a look that had forgotten what hope felt like. Her name was Lyra. She had been taken months ago, after her home colony fell to raiders. She barely remembered the attack anymore. Everything after that had become the same endless blur, being transported from ship to ship, being tied, being inspected, being told she had no value, and that her only worth was whatever someone was willing to pay. Her wrists were always sore, her legs always tired. Her voice had stopped working weeks ago. When people passed by, she looked at the ground. When someone stopped to check her, she held her breath. She survived by not being noticed too much, not being interesting, not being a problem. That morning, a group of rough-looking merchants came to evaluate the new captives. They laughed loudly, pointed at the ones that looked strong, and completely ignored Lyra. She had long accepted it. She was too small, too thin, too quiet. She didn't match any job that paid well. She didn't even look intimidating enough to scare children. The merchant who owned the line had tried many times to sell her, but everyone walked past as if she did not exist. Lyra didn't blame them. She no longer expected kindness. She no longer expected anything except another day of uncomfortable waiting. But then the crowd shifted. A human walked into the market. Humans weren't rare in Helios Station, but this one moved differently. He walked with purpose, not swagger. He looked around with calm eyes instead of hungry ones, and he wasn't wearing any colors that marked him as a buyer of captives. He wore simple, practical travel clothes with dust from a long journey. He seemed like someone who had seen many places but still carried a quiet strength. His name was Daniel Hayes. Daniel wasn't there to purchase anyone. He had come to repair his ship, refill supplies, and leave. But the loud shouting near the captive line made him pause. He disliked seeing people treated like objects, but he also knew this part of the galaxy didn't obey the same laws as the inner systems. Normally, he stayed out of trouble. Normally, he didn't interfere. Still, something pulled his attention toward the line. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the uncomfortable feeling in his chest. Maybe it was because he saw someone who wasn't even trying to lift her head anymore. Lyra. Her posture caught him. Her stillness. Her exhaustion. She wasn't begging for help, not out loud. Not even with her eyes, but something about her looked defeated in a way that shouldn't be ignored. Daniel didn't move closer immediately. He observed from a distance, watching how she flinched each time someone laughed too close to her. He noticed how she pressed her fingers tightly together, trying to calm herself. He saw the small tremble in her breath whenever the merchant walked past. He didn't know her story. He didn't need to. He only knew she was suffering. The merchant spotted him staring and quickly walked over with a big grin. "Human traveler. Looking to buy one of our fine workers? Get your pick before they're gone." Daniel didn't smile. "What's going on here?" The merchant laughed as if it were obvious. "Selling labor, of course. Cheap, reliable, perfect for dangerous work or simple tasks. Take a look. Take a look." Daniel didn't like the way the merchant spoke. He didn't like how the man's voice carried so proudly over the captives. He didn't like the casual cruelty. But he stayed calm. "I'm not looking to buy," he said, turning slightly. But before he could walk away, the merchant grabbed his sleeve. "Wait. Humans always pay well. Let me show you one who might interest you." And Daniel almost pulled his arm back sharply, but he stopped himself. He didn't want to start trouble. He didn't want to escalate anything. "Fine," he said quietly. "Show me." The merchant grinned and walked him down the line, listing prices and strengths of each captive. Daniel barely listened. His eyes went back and forth, noticing the tired faces, the unhappy stares, the defeated silence. And then, he reached Lyra. "And this one," the merchant said with annoyance, "is useless. Too weak. No one will buy her. I'll give you a discount." Daniel turned toward him sharply. "Stop." The merchant blinked. "Stop what?" "Stop talking like that." The merchant frowned, unsure whether to be offended or confused. "It's just business, human." But Daniel wasn't looking at him. He was looking at Lyra. She didn't lift her head fully, but her eyes moved just enough for him to see the emptiness inside them. A quiet pain, a silent endurance. No spark, no fire, no hope. He remembered seeing eyes like that back on Earth, in refugee camps after natural disasters. He had helped there for months. He knew what hopelessness looked like. He stepped closer, slow and gentle. He didn't want to frighten her. Her breathing changed slightly when he approached, as if she expected something bad to happen. Daniel kept his voice steady. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. She didn't know if she was allowed to. Talking had gotten her punished in the past. Silence was safer. "She doesn't speak," the merchant said quickly. "Probably broken. Take her for cheap." "I didn't ask you." Daniel's voice was firm this time. The merchant stepped back, surprised. Daniel crouched slightly so he wasn't towering over her. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. "I just want to know your name." Lyra swallowed. Her throat was dry. She hadn't used her voice for so long that speaking felt like something strange. But something in his tone, calm, kind, patient, made her want to try. "Lyra," she whispered, barely audible. Daniel nodded slowly. "Lyra. That's a beautiful name." Her eyes widened just a tiny bit. No one had complimented her name since she was taken. No one had spoken to her like she mattered. The merchant stepped forward again. "Human, if you want her, I'll give you a—" "How much?" Daniel interrupted. The merchant froze for a moment, then grinned widely. "For her? Cheap. Very cheap. Just enough to cover my losses." Daniel didn't care about the price. He knew he shouldn't be supporting this kind of market. But he also knew that leaving Lyra here meant she would suffer until someone cruel bought her, or worse, until the merchant gave up and discarded her. Daniel made the choice. "I'll take her." Lyra blinked in shock. Her heart raced. Why would a stranger buy her? Was he going to put her to work? Was he going to yell at her? The merchant rushed to unlock her restraints. The metal bars released with a hiss of air. Lyra's legs trembled as she stepped out, unsure if she could even stand properly again. Daniel moved closer, offering his hand instinctively. She hesitated, then lightly touched his palm, using it to balance herself. His hand was warm. She hadn't felt warmth from another person in so long. Once the restraints were fully removed, Daniel placed his jacket around her shoulders because she looked cold. The gesture confused her even more. He didn't shove her. He didn't drag her. He simply guided her away from the line, keeping a respectful distance so she wouldn't feel pressured. As they walked out of the market, Lyra kept glancing at him in disbelief. She finally gathered the courage to speak again, voice trembling. "Why? Why did you take me?" Daniel looked forward, thinking for a moment. "Because you looked like you needed someone to help you stand again." Her chest tightened. She didn't know whether she wanted to cry or keep walking. She wasn't used to words like that. Kindness confused her. She didn't trust it. She didn't understand it, but a small warmth grew inside her, faint and unfamiliar. When they reached his ship, Daniel stopped and looked at her carefully. "Lyra, you're free now. You're not tied. You're not owned. You can leave if you want. Or, if you want somewhere safe to rest, you can come inside." Lyra stared at him. The word free didn't feel real. Freedom was something she hadn't dared to imagine. Her legs didn't move. Her voice shook. "I don't know where to go." Daniel nodded. "Then stay here for now. You can decide later." Lyra slowly walked inside the ship, still clutching his jacket as if it was the only solid thing in her world. For the first time in many months, she didn't feel like she was falling. For the first time in many months, a tiny seed of hope settled quietly in her chest. And for the first time since she had lost everything, she wasn't alone. Lyra sat quietly inside Daniel's ship, unsure where to look or how to behave. The interior was dim but warm, lit with soft golden lights running along the walls. It was nothing like the cold metal cages she had been kept in for months. The ship smelled faintly of engine grease, clean air filters, and something almost like earth coffee. It felt lived in, familiar, almost safe. She did not understand why safety scared her so much. Daniel closed the door behind them and activated the lock. The quiet click made Lyra flinch before she realized it wasn't meant to trap her. She wrapped his jacket tighter around herself, trying to understand the strange weight in her chest. Relief? Fear? Confusion? She didn't know. Daniel noticed her trembling but didn't approach too fast. He'd seen rescued refugees before. Some froze easily, some panicked, some needed time just to believe they weren't in danger. Lyra looked like someone who had forgotten how to relax. "You can sit anywhere," he said gently. "You don't have to stand." She nodded but didn't move. Standing felt safer. She didn't want to break any rules he hadn't said yet. Daniel walked a few steps to the small kitchen area and poured water into a metal cup. He didn't hand it to her abruptly. Instead, he placed it on the table and stepped back. "If you're thirsty, it's for you." Lyra stared at the cup like it was an impossible gift. Clean water, offered freely. She approached slowly, not trusting her shaking hands. When she finally lifted the cup, the cold metal made her fingers tingle. She took a small sip, then another. The water felt like it washed dust from her soul. Daniel watched quietly. He didn't comment. He didn't rush her. After a few moments, he spoke again. "You can take my jacket if it's too warm." Her grip tightened immediately, as if he were asking her to give up the only good thing she had received in months. Daniel quickly raised his hands in reassurance. No, you can keep it. I only meant you don't have to if it's uncomfortable." Lyra lowered her head in embarrassment. She didn't know how to respond. Words were still difficult. Daniel stepped to the control panel and pressed a few buttons. The ship hummed lightly as the engines warmed. "I'm leaving this station soon," he said. "But before that, you need rest. There's a small cabin at the back. It's not much, but the bed is clean." Lyra blinked. A bed. Her own space. It sounded too good to be true. She followed him slowly as he led the way down a narrow hallway. He stopped in front of a door and tapped the panel beside it. The door slid open, revealing a small room with a bed fixed to the wall, a folded blanket, and a little storage shelf. Nothing fancy, but to Lyra, it looked like heaven. "You can stay here as long as you need," Daniel said. "No one will bother you. And you don't have to work. You don't owe me anything." Lyra's breath caught. For months, every breath she took was treated like a debt. Hearing someone say she owed nothing made her feel like her chest might break. She stepped into the room slowly, her eyes wide as she touched the edge of the bed with careful fingers. Daniel watched her silently. She was so light and fragile, it almost hurt him to see how carefully she moved. Like every object might punish her. Like every comfort was a trap. He didn't stay long. He didn't want to overwhelm her. "If you need me," he said, "I'll be in the cockpit." She nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the bed. When he left, Lyra sat down carefully, almost afraid the bed would disappear. Then she touched the blanket, then the pillow. All soft, all real. She leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. For the first time in many months, she didn't hear shouting or metal chains. Just the steady hum of the ship and the faint echo of Daniel's footsteps moving away. She wanted to cry, but her body didn't remember how. Instead, she lay slowly on the bed, curled up in the jacket he gave her, and let her mind drift. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in the cockpit and stared at the controls without activating them. He wasn't sure what to do next. He had no plan for this. He didn't know Lyra's homeworld, her language variations, her medical needs, or her history. He didn't even know if taking her with him was legal in this part of space. But he knew one thing. Leaving her behind had not been an option. He sighed and leaned back in the pilot seat. "What did I just get myself into?" he whispered to himself. But part of him already knew the answer. Humanity had always stepped forward when someone needed help. Even in faraway systems where humans were still misunderstood or feared, their compassion was known. Kindness was a strength, not a weakness. Hours passed quietly. Lyra remained in the cabin, drifting in and out of sleep. Her body was exhausted beyond measure. When she finally woke, she felt slightly stronger. Not normal, just less broken. She sat up carefully and listened. Daniel was still in the cockpit, the faint blue light reflecting along the hallway. She wondered if she should go to him. She didn't know the rules. She didn't know if he expected her to stay hidden. She hesitated before taking a step out of the room. Daniel turned slightly when he heard her feet touch the floor. He gave a small smile. Not too big, not too bright, just gentle enough not to scare her. "Did you get some rest?" She nodded. "Good." He tapped a few buttons, and the ship lights brightened slightly. "I figured we could leave the station soon. But I want to ask you something first." Lyra tensed. Her fingers curled slightly. She waited. Daniel spoke carefully, slowly, choosing words that didn't sound like commands. Lyra lowered her eyes. "No, there is no home left." Daniel's heart sank a little. "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "Not your fault." She didn't say more. The silence was heavy but not hostile. Daniel let it be. "I can look for any safe settlement," he offered. "Or, if you want, you can stay with me until you decide." "Well," her breath hitched slightly. "Stay. With you? Only if you want to," he said. "You're not trapped here. You're not owned. You're a person. You choose." The word choose felt like something she hadn't heard in a lifetime. She swallowed. "I don't know what to do." "That's okay," he replied. "You don't have to decide today." Lyra stood quietly, looking out at the stars through the cockpit window. Endless, cold, and vast, but somehow less frightening than before. Daniel watched her, noticing how she hugged the jacket closer around herself. "You must be hungry," he said. "I can make something simple." She blinked in confusion. "Food? For me?" "Of course," he said with a small smile. "Why wouldn't it be?" Lyra didn't have an answer. For months, food was thrown at her, or taken away, depending on the mood of her captors. The idea of someone making her food out of kindness felt unreal. Daniel walked to the small kitchen and began preparing a basic meal. He didn't rush. He didn't make noise. Every movement was calm. Lyra hovered in the doorway, unsure if she should help, but he never told her to step back or leave. She watched him slice vegetables and heat water. She watched steam rise and smelled something warm. Her stomach clenched with hunger. Daniel placed a bowl on the table and slid it gently toward her. "Eat slowly. Your body's been through a lot." She nodded and sat carefully. The first spoonful made her eyes sting. Not from the heat, because it was good. Because it was warm. Because it didn't hurt her. Daniel sat across from her, eating his own meal quietly so she wouldn't feel watched. After a few minutes, Lyra's shoulders loosened just a little. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes softened. She wasn't smiling. She didn't remember how. But she didn't look afraid anymore. When they finished, Daniel cleaned the dishes. Lyra stood suddenly, startled by her own impulse. "I can help," she whispered. "You don't have to," Daniel replied. "I want to help." Her voice was small, but it was the first time she had expressed a desire since he met her. Daniel understood how important that was. He stepped aside gently and let her clean one of the bowls. She did it slowly, carefully, as if afraid she might break something. But Daniel didn't correct her. He didn't push her. He simply let her do it. Afterward, she seemed calmer, almost grounded. Daniel leaned on the counter. Lyra, I know it's too soon to talk about everything, but someday, when you're ready, you can tell me what happened. Only when you're ready. Lyra looked at him for several long seconds. Then she whispered, "Thank you." Daniel didn't realize how powerful that word would feel coming from someone who had survived so much. He nodded. "You don't need to thank me," he said softly. "I'm just doing what anyone should." Lyra lowered her eyes, but her lips trembled slightly. She clutched the jacket again. "Not everyone." Daniel's chest tightened. He understood. The ship's engines hummed louder as he prepared for takeoff. Lyra stood beside him, steady but uncertain, watching the station slowly leave the window. For months, she had been afraid of what each new day would bring. For months, her life had only been darkness, fear, and chains. Now, for the first time, she felt something different. Not comfort yet, not happiness, but something small and fragile, hope. And as Daniel guided the ship into open space, Lyra realized something quietly inside her heart. Maybe she had been purchased that day, but she had not been claimed. She had been rescued, and maybe, just maybe, her life was about to become something she never believed possible. Days passed quietly. As Daniel's ship moved through deep space, Lyra slowly adjusted to her new life, though every step felt like learning to breathe again. She still woke up sometimes gasping, expecting chains, expecting shouting, expecting cold metal floors. But each time she opened her eyes, she saw the soft lights of the small cabin Daniel had given her. She heard the gentle hum of the ship. She smelled warm air instead of rust and fear. Every morning, Daniel greeted her with a calm voice that never rushed or demanded anything. Sometimes, he made simple meals. Sometimes he asked if she slept well. Sometimes he didn't ask anything, letting the silence be comfortable instead of frightening. Lyra appreciated that more than she could express. She still didn't talk much, but she began answering him faster, using more than single words. She began eating without hesitation. She even started walking around the ship instead of staying in the corner of her cabin. Daniel noticed every small change, not with surprise, but with quiet gratitude. One evening, they sat together in the cockpit as the ship drifted toward a distant nebula, glowing blue and silver. Lyra watched the swirling colors through the window, her eyes wide with a soft wonder. She hadn't looked at the stars like this since childhood. Daniel leaned back in the pilot seat and glanced at her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Lyra nodded. "I forgot. Stars could look warm." Daniel smiled at that. "They were always there. You just didn't have the chance to see them." She hugged his jacket closer around her shoulders. It still felt like the warmest thing she owned. After a moment, she spoke quietly, as if choosing each word carefully. "You keep saying I have choices. I don't know how to choose. Everything feels big." Daniel nodded patiently. "That's normal. When someone has lived through hard things for a long time, freedom feels scary. Even good things feel confusing." Lyra stared at the nebula. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Daniel replied. "Taking care of someone doesn't make them a burden. It only means they needed someone who understood." She looked down at her hands. Her fingers still shook sometimes. "Why do you care so much?" Daniel took a breath before answering. "Because I've seen people lose hope before. I watched it happen on Earth after disasters and wars. I watched people give up on living, and I promised myself, if I ever had the chance to pull someone back from that darkness, I would." Lyra didn't reply, but her eyes softened. Later that night, Daniel decided it was time to check Lyra's physical condition properly. He didn't want to frighten her, so he approached gently. "Lyra, I want to make sure you're healthy. No rush, no touching needed. Just a simple scan from the med pod. It's painless." She hesitated. Being examined brought back unpleasant memories. But Daniel's voice didn't sound like those who had mistreated her. His eyes were honest. "Will it hurt?" she asked softly. "No," he said. "It's like standing in a warm breeze." After a moment, She nodded. The medpod hummed quietly as she stepped inside. A pale blue light passed over her body, checking bones, muscles, organs. Daniel stayed a respectful distance away, watching the readings appear on a screen. He tried not to look worried, but his jaw tightened as he saw signs of malnourishment, dehydration, and old injuries. Nothing life-threatening, but nothing light either. When the scan finished, Lyra stepped out. "Is it bad?" Daniel shook his head gently. "Nothing we can't fix. You're underweight and low on nutrients. Your body needs time to heal. But there's nothing permanent." Lyra breathed out slowly. Relief washed across her face. She didn't notice Daniel's slight smile as he watched her shoulders relax. Over the next week, Daniel cooked more meals and encouraged her to rest. Lyra started looking healthier. Little by little, her skin tone brightened, her eyes regained a faint glow, and she started walking with more confidence. Sometimes she even stood beside Daniel in the cockpit for hours, just watching the stars in silence. One night, after a quiet dinner, Lyra finally asked something she had kept inside since the first day. "Daniel, why did you buy me?" "Really?" Daniel froze for a moment, mid-cleaning a dish. He turned to face her. "I didn't buy you, Lyra. I bought your freedom. There's a difference." "But you spent money," she said softly. "You could have walked away." "Maybe," he said. "But then you would still be suffering. And I couldn't do that. Not when I saw how much pain you carried." Lyra lowered her head. "You risked something. For me, it wasn't a risk. It was the right thing." Lyra didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to anyone doing the right thing for her. She wasn't used to mattering. That night, she struggled to sleep. Not because she was afraid, because her heart felt full of a strange warmth she didn't understand. She lay awake, staring at the gentle lights above the bed, wondering why Daniel's voice echoed in her mind long after he left the hallway. The next morning, Daniel informed her that they would approach a trade hub called Astra Gate. "It's safer than the last station," he explained. "Better laws, better people. We can get supplies, maybe find you clothes that fit, maybe even find records about your colony. If you want." "Okay." Her breath caught. "If there are records, maybe someone survived." "Maybe," Daniel said. "We won't know until we check." Hope flickered inside her. Small but real. When they arrived, the station wasn't like the chaotic one where she had been sold. Astra Gate was bright, clean, full of different species, walking freely without fear. Lyra stayed close to Daniel, still nervous around crowds. But the atmosphere felt different. No one shouted. No one stared cruelly. No one treated her like property. Daniel guided her gently, not grabbing her, not pulling her, just walking beside her, letting her match his steps. They entered an information center, where a helpful AI asked for colony records. Daniel provided the name of Lyra's home. Lyra stood silently, gripping the edges of his jacket. The AI processed the request for a long minute. Then, records found. Colony destroyed. Few survivors relocated. Possible refugee settlement identified. Access available. Lyra's breath stopped. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. Daniel placed a hand near her, not touching, just close enough to steady her if she swayed. "Do you want to go there?" he asked softly. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Her thoughts spun. What if she found no one? What if she found someone who blamed her? What if walking into that settlement hurt more than being in chains? I don't know," she whispered. "I'm scared." Daniel nodded. "It's okay to be scared. You don't have to decide right now." Quote, she looked up at him slowly. "Are you going to leave me there?" His eyes softened deeply. "Lyra, I will not leave you anywhere you don't want to stay. You are not a burden. You are not alone." Her knees weakened slightly. She had never heard words like that. She barely found breath to whisper, "Thank you for staying." Daniel didn't say anything to that. He didn't need to. His quiet presence already answered. On the way back to the ship, Lyra walked a little closer to him, not touching, but near enough to feel protected. She watched the people around her with less fear. She even glanced at shop windows and food stalls with curiosity. Daniel noticed and smiled quietly. Once they returned to the ship, Lyra sat in the cockpit again, hugging her knees. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "My mind feels empty and full at the same time." "That's normal," Daniel said. "Your life changed too fast. You don't need answers now." She looked at him, studying his face. "Then what should I do?" "Live," he said simply. "Heal. Learn who you are again." Lyra absorbed his words slowly. Something inside her began to shift like a door opening, letting in light after years of darkness. She took a deep breath. "Daniel, if I never find a home, is it okay to stay with you?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, you can stay as long as you want, as long as you feel safe." Her eyes glistened with emotion she didn't fully understand yet. "I do feel safe, with you." Daniel's chest tightened gently. He didn't say anything sentimental, but he nodded with genuine warmth. "Then, you're exactly where you need to be." Lyra looked back at the stars through the cockpit window. For the first time, they didn't look cold. They looked like a path, one she was no longer walking alone, and somewhere deep in her heart, she felt something new growing. Not just hope, but trust, something she never thought she would feel again. The stars stretched endlessly around Daniel's ship as it glided through deep space. Lyra sat near the cockpit window, watching the nebulae drift by in shades of blue and violet, still trying to process everything that had happened over the past weeks. She no longer felt trapped or afraid in the same way, but a quiet tension lingered in her chest. The past didn't vanish just because she was free. Chains, hunger, loneliness, and cruelty were memories she couldn't ignore. Daniel noticed her gaze but didn't interrupt. He knew she needed time. He understood that healing was not a race, not something forced, but a slow, careful rebuilding of trust in herself and others. Silence was sometimes the kindest thing he could offer. Finally, Lyra turned to him, her eyes reflecting the colors of the passing stars. "Daniel, do you ever feel like the universe is too big?" He chuckled softly. "All the time. Especially when you're small in it. And it feels like there's no one looking out for you." She looked down at her hands. I used to believe I was invisible. That no one would ever care." Daniel reached out, placing a hand gently on the edge of the console near her. "You're not invisible anymore. And you matter. You always mattered." The weight of his words pressed gently on her chest. She didn't know how to respond, but a small, fragile smile crept across her lips. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. For the first time in months, she felt seen not as property, not as a burden, but as a person. Over the next few days, Daniel guided her through small routines aboard the ship. He let her help with the navigation panels, allowing her to press buttons and monitor sensors under his supervision. He didn't rush, didn't scold when she made mistakes, and always explained patiently. Lyra learned quickly, her hands steadying over the panels as confidence slowly returned. She found satisfaction in small successes. A sensor aligned correctly. A fuel calculation done without error. A chart plotted perfectly. Each success reminded her that she could trust herself again. One afternoon, while the ship drifted near an asteroid field, Daniel set up a small projector to show the history of human exploration and interstellar travel. He wanted her to see that there were civilizations far beyond her home colony, that not all places were cruel, and that people could build, protect, and create. Lyra sat quietly, absorbing the images, listening to the narrations, letting the knowledge wash over her like sunlight after a long storm. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled, his hands folded over his lap. "Because knowledge is freedom, Lyra. Understanding the universe around you makes it less frightening. It reminds you that there's more than just fear and pain." She nodded slowly, eyes still glued to the flickering stars and planets in motion on the screen. Her heart felt lighter, but still cautious. The shadow of the past lingered like a quiet echo. That evening, Lyra approached Daniel cautiously. "Daniel, I think I want to see the settlement you mentioned at Astra Gate," she said. Her voice was steady but tentative, showing the balance of hope and fear. Daniel's eyes softened. "Are you sure?" he asked. "You can wait as long as you need. There's no rush." "I'm ready to know if there's anything left of my home," she replied. He nodded, reaching out to guide her gently toward the cabin doorway. "Then, we'll do it carefully. Together." The journey to Astra Gate was uneventful, but every passing moment felt heavier for Lyra. She didn't know what to expect. Memories of her destroyed colony, the screams, the chaos, the empty streets, all played quietly in her mind. Daniel stayed beside her, patient and silent, letting her process her fears without pushing. When the settlement came into view, Lyra froze. The buildings were small but well kept. People moved about with purpose, talking and laughing, trading and working. A sense of life and warmth filled the place. She swallowed hard, unsure if this was real. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized the possibility. There might be survivors, people she knew, people who remembered her. Daniel placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Take your time," he said. "We'll go slowly." Lyra nodded, stepping down from the ship cautiously. The ground felt solid beneath her feet, not cold metal or unstable floor. She drew a deep breath, feeling the unfamiliar but comforting sensation of safety. Walking through the streets of the settlement, she scanned faces. Some were alien, like her. Some were humans. All were busy with their own lives. Her stomach twisted. What if no one remembered her? What if she had imagined everything that mattered? Suddenly, a familiar voice called her name. "Lyra?" She froze and turned. A small group approached, familiar shapes, faces she thought she'd never see again. A few were older, but their eyes carried recognition immediately. Tears pricked her eyes. I can't believe." One of the survivors stepped forward. "We thought you were gone. We didn't know if anyone survived." Their voice trembled with relief and emotion. Lyra's knees nearly buckled. Daniel stayed behind her, giving her space. He watched silently, letting her reclaim this part of herself. For months, she had carried grief, fear, and the weight of solitude. Now, those who had once shared her life were here, alive. And they recognized her. They embraced cautiously, carefully, like survivors wary of loss. Lyra felt a warmth she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. The people smiled, cried, laughed, and whispered her name. She clung to the memories of her family and friends as they shared their own stories of survival and hardship. Through all of it, Daniel remained nearby, his presence steady and reassuring. He didn't intrude. He didn't demand acknowledgement. He simply allowed Lyra to experience this moment fully. As the sun set over the settlement, casting golden light over streets and buildings, Lyra finally spoke. I didn't think I would see you again. I didn't think anyone would remember me." Her friends shook their heads. "We never stopped hoping," one said. Lyra glanced at Daniel, who gave her a small, encouraging smile. She realized something crucial. Her life was no longer only about survival. It was about connection, belonging, and trust. Daniel had given her the chance to believe in those things again. Later, when the crowd had dispersed and the settlement returned to normal life, Daniel approached her gently. "How do you feel?" Lyra exhaled slowly, letting the weight of years' fear and loneliness finally shift. "Different," she said. "Still scared sometimes. But not alone." Daniel nodded. "That's the most important part. You'll never be alone, Lyra. Not as long as we're together." She smiled softly, the first real smile that had not been tentative or fearful. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." He placed a hand lightly on hers. "You don't have to thank me," You've earned your place in the universe. You've earned the right to hope. As night fell over the settlement, Lyra looked up at the stars again, this time with a heart unburdened by chains or fear. The past had shaped her. Yes, but it did not define her. Freedom, safety, and trust were now real. And the future was hers to choose. Daniel stood beside her, watching quietly. He knew there would still be challenges, still moments when the memories of pain would return, but he also knew Lyra had the strength to face them, not alone, not ever again. For the first time in many years, Lyra felt whole, and as the stars twinkled above, infinite and bright, she finally believed in herself. She believed in humanity. She believed in hope. She believed in the possibility of a life where she was free, loved, and capable of standing tall. A life she had never imagined she could have. The universe stretched endlessly, full of dangers and wonders alike. But Lyra was ready. She would explore it, live it, and embrace it fully, not as a captive, not as a survivor alone, but as a human-bound traveler, guided by her courage and the quiet, steady presence of the one who had given her back her life. For the first time, Lyra smiled without hesitation, and she knew her story was only beginning.